at this time in my life when I was kind of starved of the creative aspect of my job, it was the first time in my life that I had the tools to make cool digital and digital hardware related art. And I wanted to use it as a chance to sort of overcome the insecurities I felt about showing the things I made to people. So I made an Instagram and started making one-off explorations with either code or specific hardware or a combination of both. And I wanted to make more digital art and show it to people. Again, sort of in the right place at the right time. I'd built a little bit of an audience on Instagram with some of the stuff I was making. And then you have the pandemic, you have the NFT boom of late 2020, early 2021. And I have like a little bit of a foothold with like people that are into digital art on Instagram, which is sort of the people that ended up getting into NFTs. And so I took the stuff I was making for Instagram once I got a little bit more disillusioned with what I was doing at work. Not disillusioned, but like bored, I guess. That's when I started going harder, and then NFTs took off. And so I had sort of a surplus of ideas and simulations and digital art leaning things, generative art leaning things. And then I had, for the first time, like an ability to sell it, which was super crazy.
All right, episode 7. Just had a great conversation with Michael Kozlowski, also known as MpKoz, who's an incredibly talented long-form generative artist with a background as a software developer and media artist. Michael has continued to push his own limits and boundaries over the last few years when it comes to algorithmic art and creating physical sculptures. And in this episode, we cover all of his main releases since 2021. We cover what he's working on right now and kind of his future goals that he has in 2026 and onwards, and his backstory as to how he even entered the space in the first place. So this was a really interesting conversation. I really enjoyed speaking with Michael, and I hope you enjoyed the episode.
Hey guys, before we jump in, I just wanted to mention that I am planning on releasing my first ever photography collection soon. So my background in photography spans over 20 years. And over the last few years in particular, I've been compiling some photos that I think is pretty much ready to share with the community at this point. So if you're interested in learning more, or you want to support me with the release of this collection, please feel free to send me a message. And I'll be sharing more details soon. So thank you very much.
Before we jump in, none of this is financial advice. This is for entertainment and information purposes only. Please take everything with a grain of salt and do your own research. More information can be found in the podcast episode description below. All right, now let's get into it. Okay, Michael, it's great to have you on the show, man. Man, I'm glad we could make time. I know we've been talking back and forth for quite some time, trying to find time for us both to have this conversation. So I'm glad we could make it work.
Same. Good to see you again.
Yeah, man, you too.
I feel like I've been seeing a lot of you lately too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we just saw each other at the Node Foundation event in Palo Alto. That was
awesome.
That was awesome.
Great
yeah, that was a good time.
I saw pretty much, everybody I wanted to see was there.
For sure. Yeah, it was awesome to be there. I felt like it was kind of like a mini Marfa, a little bit. It was kind of like that smaller kind of community vibe almost, because we were all kind of packed in within a couple blocks in Palo Alto. So that was awesome. Yeah.
Herding around. It was very, I didn't think about it, very reminiscent of Marfa.
For sure.
Main Street situation and just bouncing around between places on Main Street.
For sure, man. Yeah. And I feel like, when Marfa happens once a year, and I'm always looking forward to like the next Marfa. And so it's great to have now we've got Node Foundation. I don't know what they have kind of planned coming up, but I think that they're going to have multiple events throughout the year. So
yeah,
it's a good excuse to get out to the West Coast and, meet up with everybody there.
Yeah. It's nice to have, as someone that lives on the West Coast, it's nice to have a West Coast event, at least a place that will occasionally have events. Cause I feel like most of the time I'm going to the East Coast or Europe. So it was good to stay in the same time zone.
For sure, man. For sure.
6 hours to get anywhere basically. So it was nice to just hop on a quick flight. And it was cool that it was kind of spaced right in the middle of the year in terms of Marfa to have a little 6 month check in with everybody that usually goes to Marfa.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Yeah, so I actually kind of starting off, we have Art Basel in Hong Kong that's happening. Just it might be happening in right now. I can't remember. It's sometime in the next week or so. And I know that you recently had some work shown with Art Basel in Miami just in December, just 4 months ago. So I kind of want to start off just like hearing about what that experience was like, and yeah, just kind of like how do you feel now? You've released the works, you showed them at Art Basel Miami, and just like kind of any kind of takeaways from that experience. I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it was so fun to be a part of. I kind of underestimated how uh cool it would be, I guess, the 010 space in general. I mean, not just like our booth or anything. That was kind of the point. It was just anchored by the by uh regular animals, and that just kind of got everybody in the door. And I it was pretty surreal to have work there with the amount of foot traffic that it was generating, and definitely humbling. And like I usually don't like talking to strangers that much, especially for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours straight. But I had a blast talking to people that were unfamiliar with generative art, unfamiliar with digital art. It was sort of like I don't know, kind of I hadn't felt like I had all those Thanksgiving conversations that we all have with like our families, like what are you doing? Like we don't understand it, sort of stuff. Years ago, and now they're all caught up with everything, and it was kind of fun to go back in time and talk to people that had never heard about algorithmic art, and try to explain why it's so cool, and what capabilities it offers and stuff. But yeah, all in all, it was like just walking around like the main. I like going to art. I've gone to Art Basel, I think 4 or 5 years in a row now, and the main convention floor is also really fun to go and experience and see. It's kind of like a condensed museum, so you can see a lot of really cool uh, contemporary art as well as old masters, all in the same block basically. And I've always really liked that about art fairs, the few that I've been to. And so it was cool to have that part of it. But then coming into 010, it was sort of an isolated part of the convention hall, and just seeing the foot traffic like quadruple or quintuple. It was awesome to see how much energy there was in our little corner of the convention, versus sort of the quiet. And it's not necessarily quiet, but like there's definitely like room to have a little conversation in the other parts of the convention hall, whereas 010 was just like packed the whole time and super lively, and it was so cool to be a part of. And I was proud of the work too. Like again, not just mine. I think everybody killed it. Like it was it was awesome to see like Dimitri, like the ringers animations going. I could see them from across the hall from where I was, and then regular animals obviously was super cool. And the ArtBlocks booth with the Larva Labs guys was great. And uh everybody's just killed it. Yeah, it was a really cool thing to be a part of. I kind of fell into it too, uh last minute, sort of like we were. I wasn't expecting to do it at all. I think I'd heard about that it was going on, and then but none of the artists had been announced or anything. And I was in New York for ACK's Grand Skull Piano. Um, and I was with who was that with? I think I was with Luke Gannon and a couple other guys, and there was a sandwich place we wanted to eat at in Soho. I love sandwiches, and so we stopped at this, and it's like a counter serve only place. So you buy a sandwich, and then you have to go eat it on a park bench or whatever. You can't sit anywhere. So we were waiting for I was with Benny too, and we were waiting for sandwiches. And it started like pouring, like kind of out of nowhere, almost like a tropical storm situation. It was like pretty humid and kind of weird feeling out, but it wasn't stormy or anything. But it just started like raining sheets of rain, and the nearest place to duck into was Heft Gallery,
No
which was
way.
right around the corner. And I think maybe I didn't know, I'd never been to Heft before. I know Adam really well, and we've gotten fairly close over the last few years. But I hadn't yet been to the gallery, so it's kind of a perfect chance to go into the gallery and eat our sandwiches and see Adam. And luckily, he was there. But yeah, we were eating our sandwiches in the back room, and him and Benny were talking about 010. And I was like, "What's 010?" And they kind of explained it to me and stuff. And Benny was seeing if Adam had any artists or any sort of ideas that he might want to make into a booth there. And I don't think he did. I think he maybe wanted to, but didn't really have. Can't remember. I can't remember exactly. I don't want to be. I don't want to be quoted on what exactly happened, but basically the general thing was like he wanted to, but he didn't have an artist. And I was there eating my sandwich, and I was like, "Oh, it sounds cool to me. I'll do it." And
That's
so we
crazy.
just kind of started riffing on some ideas. I had a couple potential. I always have like sort of a backlog of really half baked ideas, and so we were going over some of those, and one of them fit pretty well, and we started talking more about that, and then it got more serious, and I started prototyping, and then like come probably like the end of October, November, we signed and hoped that I could finish everything in time, which was tough to pull off, but we did it. I had a pretty awful like final 3 weeks of getting everything out the door, but it worked out, and it was all very well worth it.
Dude, that's awesome. I mean, the final product looked amazing, like with what you
Thank
were
you.
able to
Yeah.
accomplish. And so how long did that process? How long was that process? It was just like a few months, right? Like 2 or 3 months, something
Yeah,
like that.
I almost want to look at the calendar to see when I was in New York, but it was whenever the ACK thing was, plus like a few weeks after that is when we finally kind of decided for sure to do it. And yeah, and then it was about I think about a month and a half at most of like, or like 5 or 6 weeks of luckily I have a lot of the machines that I use to make the pieces with here at home and or at the studio that I share with my friend, and so I can do everything in house. Ideally, if I had a longer time frame, I probably would have outsourced some of it, but yeah, it was all done in house, and I was able to pretty quickly iterate and work through the issues we were having. And then the biggest issue though is when I was done with everything and packing there was 3 wall sculptures like reliefs that hang on the wall, and then there's 2 floor sculptures that are sort of like pillars. And I was loading one of the pillars into the box to ship to Miami, and I dropped it and it shattered. And this was like right
Oh,
before Thanksgiving. I think everything had been due in Miami like that Monday, and this was like Wednesday already. And we were flying out to Montana, where I'm from, for Thanksgiving dinner later that afternoon. And all I had to do was box them and tape them and send them, take them to FedEx and put them on flight.
what?
I dropped one, so we had to cancel our Thanksgiving plans, and we ended up
Oh man.
going, but not for another couple days. But I was able to repair that one pretty, like retrofit it with the parts that it broke. I was able to fix it all up, but it's kind of like the cherry on top of a very it was like 18-hour days, for
Oh my God.
weeks finishing. But yeah, that was the big instigation in me, like feeling so stressed out about getting them to Miami. But it all worked out. They all got there. I think Adam had to maybe sneak some through the back door after setup one of the days. But
That's insane, man. I hope you had a nice vacation after that.
yeah,
Sometime to
Miami itself was really fun. Like once the work was done, it was really great to just. I like Miami too in general. It's a fun place to visit. Super stimulating, and it's especially cool during Basel when there's so many people there. And I had a buddy of mine, really good friend from decades ago, that came. He's come to Miami a couple times the last few years for Basel, but we also like we go fishing, we go to the beach, we watch. It's like always good football on that week, so he comes. He's like not. He's not an art guy at all, so it's fun to take him to Basel and kind of show him around. It's like an alien. He's like an alien in that world. It's kind of fun to see his
That's awesome.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And maybe it gives you a fresh perspective too. Like, I know, like, the like, I went to Art Basel, Miami a couple years back, and it was just an awesome experience out there. But I remember the traffic was some of the worst traffic I've ever experienced. It might be the worst traffic I ever
Yeah, I think
experienced,
it is
and I
probably the worst.
it's terrible, so bad. Like that's the only real drawback. I mean, fairly expensive too, like around that time, but yeah, I hope to go maybe this year. We'll see. I mean, Hong Kong would have been amazing, but I actually just
Yeah.
came back from Asia, about a month
Oh,
ago.
nice.
So, uh,
Where'd you go?
yeah, we went. So we flew into San Francisco for a few days to do the Palo Alto, Node Foundation event, and then from there we visited. We went to Japan. We went to Thailand and Cambodia.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah. So it was a nice trip. It was a lot of fun, But we were kind of trying to see, could we make this somehow happen too with Hong Kong, for our Basel, but between Node Foundation and that, it's just, like
Yeah,
we
it's a
weren't
lot.
able to kind of make them both happen. So um but yeah, man, it was a good trip. I love traveling out there. This painting, actually, I got this in Vietnam. Like, this is
Oh, cool. That's
maybe
beautiful.
not 9 years ago. Yeah, yeah, it's awesome.
I haven't traveled hardly at all actually nowhere in Asia. I'm kind of dying to go. It's the next frontier for sure, but
Hey, man,
yeah,
there you go.
really
Well,
excited.
maybe our Basel, Hong Kong, maybe next year.
Yeah, maybe.
Is
And
there
it's
any kind?
it's silly too, because like the flights from Seattle or so. It's like the one benefit of living up in this corner of the country is it's only 6 hours to Japan, which is pretty wild. So and it's direct and everything. I don't know why we haven't gone yet. In my head, it's just like this whole other world. 12, 6. It's like when people talk about flying to Australia or whatever, but it's not. It's not that far. So yeah, we'll put it on the list for sure.
Yeah, we flew from San Francisco to Tokyo, and I think the flight there it might have taken 10 hours going in, and then it took us 8 hours coming uh back out to Vancouver. So it was like an 8 hour flight to Vancouver from Tokyo. Long flight, but it's nothing too crazy, So I agree, man. And it costs, like, in US dollars, probably like I think it was like $350 US, like, for one way.
Oh
So,
damn.
it's like it's doable. But man, circling back, I'm curious. So with your experience at Art Basel Miami, so first off, you know, congrats again on that. Very happy that you were able to make things work. Sounds hectic. But what was the general like reception that you kind of had from people that were walking by, and like what were those conversations like, especially with people that were unfamiliar with the type of work that you do in long form generative art, or like algorithmic art. Can you speak to
Yeah.
that a little bit? Because as someone who's always curious to kind of like hear from artists what it's like talking with people about like their work, for someone who's very unfamiliar, I'm kind of curious about like what that reception was like.
Yeah, it was a lot of I'd guess generalized saying a lot of curiosity about it. Like I feel like when you walk up to look at a painting, no matter how beautiful the painting, or walk up to look at like a non-kinetic sculpture, but just sort of any static art object, it's pretty easy to you can marvel at like the technique used, but it's very easily digestible. At least from like a how did this thing come into being. It's it was painted or it was carved out of stone or whatever. So people walking up to my booth in particular were very curious about like the process that I took to make it, because it was 3D printed and then coated with copper, really detailed reliefs, and it the way that like the uh, each like individual little uh like the terrain of this thing was so hyper detailed. I don't think it would have been possible to make by hand, if you wanted to carve it or uh or fabricate it some other way by hand. So I think it spurred a lot of conversations more about the process than I think a normal art goer or event goer, experiences in like walking the main floor. That's obviously generalization. There's lots of art in Basel that was on the main floor that I have like no idea how they made it. And then I always like that's a sort of a side note, but I always like but I like that about consuming art. I love trying to figure out how it was made, and specifically with art that I don't know how it's made. I have like a natural um, attraction to those things where I'm trying to figure. There was actually a large scale painting at Basel that forget the lady's name, but I had several conversations because it was kind of en route to the cafe where we went a lot to get coffee on the main floor, and everybody I was with, we just couldn't figure out how it was made, like how she could do the specific technique, and I just like that. I like trying to think about the process. I don't know if that's unique to me or a person like me, or if that's universal, but anyways, I had a lot of questions about process, and it's a lot of, it's like, how did you make this? And then I start explaining the 3D printing process, and then they'd have another question about. It's like we never quite could finish the whole process because they would have questions about the intermediate steps. Um, and I think the biggest sense of sort of like curiosity and wonder that I saw came from the fact that these were not articulated by myself individually. Like I didn't get to choose what they looked like. I could, sort of the basis of generative art, uh, art block style on chain generative art, like not knowing what the final output will look like. That was really interesting to people, and that's one of the things that I love most about generative art too. Is sort of defining a world that these things can live in, but not knowing exactly what these things will look like. And people, I feel like, didn't necessarily struggle to wrap their head around it, but it was like one of the first times that they'd heard of sort of this procedural or algorithmic art that is repeatable and different every time. So it was nice having multiple things there, so I could show them that all. In an ideal world, I think if we had I don't think we had electricity hookups in the wall in our specific walls because it was so last minute, but it would have been nice to have uh, a display that was running through iterations of it. And I had my phone and I had an iPad too that I had the project on a website that I could refresh and show them, every time I refresh, it's a whole different pattern. And that was kind of illuminating, I think, to a lot of people. And I think a lot of there was a really nice juxtaposition with Beeple's stuff that was like right in front of me. That it was awesome for foot traffic reasons because it was sort of the natural next step was to come to my booth after Mike's, and so it was great to kind of leech off of his his crowdsourcing or crowd pulling effect. But it was sort of a nice you had the chaos of that space, and then coming over to the Tessellations booth was it was really big and open and like pretty Spartan, and it's kind of a nice reprieve from struggling for 15 minutes to like get close enough to the dogs to take pictures of them. We kind of tried to make it look a little bit like cathedral or like sort of like a sacred space, and that worked well. It was in kind of this hexagonal alcove that was sort of isolated a little bit from the sound and stuff. So yeah, I had a lot of people that just needed the break sort of come over and talk to me about what I was doing, and yeah, it was really cool to like I said earlier, like go back to square one sort of and explain what it is. And I know that like the ArtBlocks booth and the Larva Labs guys did the same and had the same reactions. And Tyler Hobbs and Dimitri, we had a huge IX shells. We had a huge generative artist cohort there, so it was. I'm sure everybody had a similar experience, kind of like educating and seeing people connect the dots. I think you could see pretty evidently, like it was nice to like we're all used to it now, like how not necessarily like revolutionary it is, but it is sort of revolutionary to be able to to sell a piece of art or consume a piece of art or look at a piece of art before you know what it's going to look like, or to have a stake in a project or a collection of work before you know what that thing is going to look like when it hits your eyes. So yeah, it was really cool to sort of go back in time and see those connections made again.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool. And I mean, that must have been also quite a meaningful experience too, to be showcasing your work alongside someone like Beeple. I remember listening to another podcast that you did, and I think you took I think it was a creative coding class, probably, I don't know, 6 years ago, 7 years ago at this point, something like that, maybe longer. I don't know.
It was longer. I think it's been
Maybe,
10.
yeah, 10 years ago, 10 years ago. And I remember you mentioning in the podcast episode that you were kind of bringing to people's attention, digital artists like Beeple, I think in the classroom. I can't remember, something like that. So these are probably some artists that you've known about
Yeah, a long time.
for quite
Yeah.
some time.
Yeah, like him and Rafiq came to the booth, and he's
Right.
an old I knew him back in when I was in undergrad in like 2015, 2016. I had it wasn't a creative coding class in that case, but it was a digital art class. And I think it was like a sort of a mini book report thing every week. We would on Fridays, I think it was, we would share with the class like one example of digital art or an example of a digital artist that made cool work um, in class. And so people would like, I feel like back then, like even though it wasn't all that long ago, it was still a little bit hard to find cool digital art. And so that's why the teacher did it, is so that we could sort of every week it was a pretty small class. I think it was like 10 or 12 kids, but every week we'd have 10 or 12 examples of cool digital art that we might have not gotten through I don't even know if Instagram had an algorithm back then, if it was just chronological. There wasn't it wasn't as explorable as it is now. So I think it kind of helped to open our eyes to the fact that there was a lot more being created than we thought. But yeah, one of my like mini book report guys was Beeple, because I followed him since I don't know, like 2015 or whatever. So it's definitely full circle, a lot of full circle moments since I've gotten into this space, for sure. Rafiq was another one. Like he was a grad student at UCLA when I was at USC, and he had like a lot of really, him and Casey Reyes and Lauren McCarthy and a couple other people at UCLA. UCLA they have a DMA, which is their digital media arts program. It's an undergrad and a grad degree, and that's where like so many amazing digital artists have come out of. And they had an awesome uh, basically like a third or a public curriculum for, like, they would often have talks and seminars and exhibitions and stuff that was open to the public. And USC at the time, I was in film school, and they had really awesome resources like for exploring interactive and digital art and everything, but it was a little bit less programming than UCLA. So I'd often go to a lot of the time the USC kids would go to UCLA to listen to a talk or a panel, or vice versa. Like sometimes the panelists would come to USC and do a talk, or do like Rafiq had like a couple. This is before he was like super big, but he would do like he'd project something on a wall at USC, and there'd be a crowd of people around it when we'd watch it and talk to him and stuff. So I got to know all those guys a lot, and girls, and that was super formative, because I at the time was very interested in being in the entertainment industry and exploring I was more interested in like sound tech and cinematography and sort of more traditional filmmaking, and I had almost no experience or no interest in computer science I shouldn't say art. I'd always had an interest in art, and especially interactive and uh, kind of like large scale. Uh, I hadn't seen too much of it, but like essentially why I was so attracted to like Rafiq's stuff at the time was how big it was and the scale of it. And so yeah, I sort of like opened my having that the LA digital art world so close and accessible to me at the time. through the course of several different circumstantial things was definitely the foundation of like why I started exploring this more. As at the time, I didn't think I could do a career, make a career out of it, but at least from like a hobbyist perspective, like I saw Rafiq's when he won the, uh, or I think it was like an application process to do the Salesforce building in San Francisco. I think you could like submit something, and if they liked it, then you got to be the artist in that, presenting on that display, this huge display. And I think that was sort of, I don't know, I don't want to don't quote me on this, but I think that was sort of his big break. Like it was his first major large public installation. And I was just on a weekend trip in San Francisco and stopped by to see it. And it was like, you know, a 30-foot curved, one of the first like massive screens that I'd seen. At the time, this is like 2016, I think, there wasn't a whole lot of these huge displays that we're sort of used to seeing now. And the technology wasn't there yet, but they had this beautiful wraparound 30-foot like LED wall, and one of Rafiq's, or there's several of Rafiq's project art pieces going on it. And I just remember like watching it. I was like on the way to a bus stop. I thought I'd just stop in and check it out really quick, but I was there for like 20 minutes watching it, and there's other people in the lobby too, just doing that, and it sort of became like a, um, I think it's still there. I think it's like sort of like a pillar of digital art in that part of San Francisco. But anyways, yeah, I saw that and I was like just awestruck. And again, sort of like I was saying earlier, like I wanted to know how it was made and like what software he was using. What I didn't know any of the language at the time, how to even ask what it was. But that's sort of being at and being at that place in time in LA and seeing like uh, seeing talks by Lauren and Casey and Ben Fry and like the people that made processing and P5. That was also informative and influential in me. Like I was like, a lot of my story is just being in the right place at the right time. Like I was in Hef Gallery eating a sandwich to get into Basel. I was at USC, you know, studying film at the time that digital art was sort of taking off in LA. So it's just, I'm just a victim of and benefactor and circumstance for sure.
Hey man,
Yeah.
that's great. I mean, that's great, man. But you know what? They like it's like they say like the people that work hardest are often, you know, end up with the best luck, something like that. Butchering the quote
Yeah,
probably, but so I'm sure that you know, like a lot of the things that you did were, you know, very intentional. I mean, you going and eating a sandwich in Hef Gallery, there's a lot of, you know, actions that you took to end up doing something like that in the first place. So, so that's so interesting, man. So then what's the, what was the process then from, so you're at, you're studying film, like film studies, at USC, and from there, you're then getting exposure to some of these folks, like you mentioned. And then that led you to then add on, I guess, a computer science minor as part of your degree. Is that right? You started kind of like
yeah. So
getting more into the
it's
computer science.
all like kind of what I was describing before with all the UCLA, the DMA stuff going on, and finding out about Rafiq and how we were all in the same town. Like I went to Rafiq's studio pretty early on. There was just so many opportunities for like exploring it more and getting sucked in further. But kind of the biggest thing is, again, coincidentally just around the same time. My degree had a requirement to take like a technical elective that was not a film class, not a video game class, but like something that was more you could take like any class in the School of Engineering or any class in like I don't know, I think business administration, like something that was pretty far outside the scope of our major. And one of the ones I got into, I really wanted to take like I think it was like a drone class, like I can't, drones were like a new thing too then. I can't remember there was one class I really wanted to take and I didn't get into that one, but the one I did get into was creative coding. And that was like, more than anything, that was like the biggest instigation in me sort of exploring this, not necessarily again as a career, because I didn't think it was a career at that point, but like, uh, I'd never I never wrote code to make, to make art. And even though it was exceedingly beginner level stuff, it was a processing slash P5 class that fulfilled a technical elective because it was computer science. It was a computer science course. I think it was held technically in the film school, but it was like by a CS professor. And just yeah, like the first week of that class, I was like, I was interested in film in the first place for because I didn't know what I wanted to do. Sort of like I applied when I was I went to community college before any 4-year university, and I was just taking like I had so much fun in community college because I'd taken like 6 or 7 years between high school and college to sort of get my shit together and work construction for a few years and stuff. And when I got into school again, I had this intellectual curiosity that I'd never had in high school. Like I always did high school because I had to. I hated going to school. I liked the social aspect and I liked sports and things like that. But and I didn't do horribly in high school or anything, but it just wasn't I didn't have like an innate curiosity in like education at all. But for some reason during those gap years, that came to me. And so when I was in community college, I was like I was in community college for like 3 or 4 years, and I took like 100 level classes and just about everything, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I still, after all that, I didn't really know, but I got into I'd always loved movies, and obviously it's a very romantic industry and kind of fun to imagine being a part of. I still feel like that. Like every time Oscar season rolls around, I'm like, damn, like it'd be so cool to work in the movies. But I chose that specifically because it's so generalized, and there's so many different aspects of making a movie that chances are you could find something that you like to do. So it was almost like a compromise, like being in film school, like because I would delay another few years, like needing to pick something to be good at. And so anyways, I was in the film school and I took this class, and it was the first time that and at the time we were probably just like moving a circle across the screen, like something super simple, but it was the first time in my life that I remember thinking like, wow, this is like scratching all of the itches that I want, that I like. I was, I sat down at the computer and I'd immediately go and flow, and I would be like the end of the 2-hour period and like right away. And then I started doing, doing the homework, and it would be like, I would instead of like trying to get through the homework so I could go play video games or like go hang out with friends or whatever, like all the other homework I ever had in my life, it was like where I would rather be doing the homework for this creative coding class than anything else. And so it sort of for whatever reason it just was what I wanted to do, and or what my brain wanted to do. Like I felt good doing it, and I like the left and right brain aspects of like trying to and problem solving and like trying to get something to happen, all this sort of nuance and lost in translation type stuff that occurs when you're typing code, especially when you're not a skilled programmer at all, and trying to get something to happen on a screen. It was just a very like the process of doing that. A lot of the kids in my class hated it, and like it was frustrating and and like not repetitive, but like just very it just wasn't very fun for them. For some reason, it was really fun to me. And yeah, like after a couple weeks, the professor name was Professor Moser, I think, but she was sort of like uh used to kids not liking it, I think, like, or especially because this was a class specifically for people outside of the major. Like they weren't self-selecting like I want to study computer science. These were like film kids or drama kids or whatever that didn't really have an interest in this stuff to begin with. So she was kind of taken aback that I was so into it. And I asked her like I was like, this is great, like I want to do this for work, like how can I make money with creative coding, because like this is what I want to do. And I was like so 100% for sure on it. And she was like, you can't you can't really make money making algorithmic art, but you can explore more creative applications of computer science. So if you're interested in that, then these are some classes I would take, and these are some people I would talk to and stuff. And so after that class, once I could get a circle to move across the screen and a couple other things, I just kind of dove in, and I like got into a media lab at USC that was like more like, that's when I started using Unity 3D and more advanced graphics libraries and stuff. And a lot of it was self-education too. Like I spent, like I said, like I'd almost rather be doing. I just liked it. So all the free time I had, I was devoting towards like learning more and getting better at it. And I took a lot more CS classes, and kind of like the last, I think this was like the beginning of my junior year maybe that I took this class. So the remaining 2 years I had it at USC, I still needed to fulfill the requirements for my major, but I took all the elective or all the extra credits that I could take under this little scholarship I had. I took at in the CS department, and just tried to sort of get better at that part of my skill set. And another thing that sort of captured my attention at the time was AR and VR. That was like, this is again, this is like 2015 to 2017 ish. So it was like, like sort of like how AI is now. Like that's how
Yeah.
mixed reality was back then. It was like the new, like, next new thing. Everybody wanted to do it. USC had a really amazing like access to that type of stuff in the film school, because they saw it as like the next form of storytelling and the next form of video games and the next form of narrative design and stuff. So there was all sorts of AR and VR classes that you could take. And luckily, the year before, I had gotten into the more CS side of of my education, and so a lot of that stuff was prerequisite to like doing anything in AR and VR, because AR and VR was so inherently computer science driven at the time. So yeah, again, it was sort of the right place at the right time. I was learning about this stuff and discovering that I was passionate about creative applications of programming, and then simultaneously there was a lot more opportunity to do AR and VR type stuff in the film school, which a couple years before that didn't exist. So it was the right place at the right time, and I got tons of AR and VR experience, as well as that was like also um, helping me learn more about CS fundamentals. And then by the time I was ready to graduate, I had a little bit of a skill set. Like I had experience in AR and VR, I had experience developing on HoloLens and a few of the other VR and AR headsets that were out, and that's where I got an internship in a Unity 3D internship at an AR company. And so that's sort of when it took off. I started doing it. You learn so much faster when you're working like at a job and you're doing this 8 hours a day, or 8+ hours a day. It's like you learn a lot more than school, because you're like having to solve real, not necessarily problems, but like, I have an assignment at work that I have to do and I don't know how to do it. So like you have to figure out how to do it. And so I worked at that company for a couple of years, and just like, it was just like school on steroids, because I had no idea what I was doing, and I had to figure it out. So, and I had a lot of really smart people around me that could sort of teach me along the way. And I kind of an
Yeah.
interesting anecdote. There's a generative artist named Sterling Crispin that has work on ArtBlocks and a few other places, and he's an amazing artist. But he was my boss that first summer at that internship.
That's
So we've
yeah.
known each other for a while, and he was great, because like I was so underqualified for that job, and he and he sort of schooled me really really quick with everything. Like he was super like I should have probably been fired day one, because I just didn't. I said I knew how to do a lot of stuff that I didn't on my resume and stuff. But yeah, instead of making a big deal out of it, he basically became my new professor and taught me everything I knew.
That's amazing, man. We all need mentors. So was that at Microsoft? Was that the position at
No,
Microsoft? Or,
no, Microsoft
so
was a few years later. That was Microsoft was like 2019, I think I worked there. But so the summer of my junior year, I got an internship at a company called Daiquiri. That was technically a startup, but I think they had a couple hundred employees at the time, and they had like 500 million funding. They made an industrial headset, or a helmet, essentially, that had a visor that was augmented reality enhanced. So this really cool product. It was like the Wild West at that point, with like the components, and like things were like all every single company was trying to make AR happen, and there were so many big companies and small companies that just couldn't connect the dots by the end of it. But by the time they ran out of money. But Daiquiri was they almost got there. And it was based in LA. It was they had like some of the foremost computer vision experts in the world at that company at one time, and it's a really cool place to get a job. Like when you're just out of college, like it was sort of like Silicon Valley-esque too, like the TV show, like really mismanaged funding. There's like, you know, all of us had like a personal trainer, and there was a full kitchen, and uh you know, like a massage, you got a massage every week, and there's like ping pong table. It was just like the whole tech
Nice.
utopia sort of vibe there.
Yeah.
And coming from, I worked construction, you know, for years prior to that for basically minimum wage. And so all of a sudden I'm getting paid $30 an hour, which was like, sounded like the most money I'd ever heard of. And I was in this, like, I could like make an avocado smoothie anytime I wanted. And it was a trip. I actually met my wife there too. We
Oh,
were both interns the same summer, and started dating after that. But yeah, so I worked at Daiquiri for like almost 2 years, I think. I had an internship, and then I got a job there for a little while, and then they started kind of running out of money, and people started leaving. All my favorite people that worked there got jobs other places. And again, sort of coincidentally, a couple students at USC that had internships that same summer that I was there, they were in I forget what they call it, but like the Ivan Young Academy, which is like a startup major. Basically, it's a really cool program at USC. Um, that it's really small, and they essentially have to come up with a business idea in school and then make it happen during and after school. But four of these guys that were in that program started a company called Mira after graduation, and it was also an AR company, an AR headset company that uses your phone, your phone display as like a source for reflection from the display into your eyes. And so anybody could plug in their phone to this headset and have an AR display, a head-mounted AR display. But I worked there. I met them at Daiquiri, and then I got a job at that. I was like, you know, employee 8 or something at Mira. And I was at Mira for a couple years from 2017 to 2019, I think. But and then I went to Microsoft after
okay.
that.
Okay. And then, yeah, talk about that experience at Microsoft. Because I think it was fairly soon after that you ended up going down this path of releasing your own artwork. So I think just kind of give us a little bit of that kind of backstory, I guess, of like working at Microsoft and then your eventual transition and towards like
Yeah.
releasing your artwork.
So when I was at USC, uh, I had I can't remember what class it was, but we had a guest lecturer. His name is Mark Bolus. Um, he's an older guy. He'd been doing VR for decades. Like I think he started working on VR products back in like the 80s for NASA and stuff. I think he helped build the original space simulator and a bunch of other really cool old school mixed
Wow.
reality things. I think him and another guy. I think or I might be misremembering, but I think they did for their college. He was a MIT Media Lab guy, and I think for their Media Lab project, they did essentially what Google Street View is, but this is in like the 70s. So I think they went around. This might be this might be the professor that was teaching the class, but him and Mark were old friends. I can't remember exactly how it was, uh, who did this project, but it was really cool. They did like a full, you could explore Aspen, Colorado via photos. They took photos of every single square inch of the
Wow.
entire town, including like inside buildings and stuff. And they made this interface for exploring Aspen virtually. And so I was just like, that's what I meant by earlier. Like there were so many opportunities to like pick the brains of guys that have been working in VR or AR for like USC spent so much money getting these guys and girls to come teach there. And then they were my professors, and so like you had these titans of, you know, the origin of VR and AR, kind of like all around. But anyways, we had one of my classes, we had a guest lecturer named Mark Bolus, who used to work at USC. I think he still technically did. He was on sabbatical, but he was the director of the Institute for Creative Technology, which is a really formidable and old, like revered technology. It's fairly complex, but they were funded by USC and a few other places. They had like world-class motion capture studio. I think a lot of movies were shot using a lot of the technology at ICT. They had like the inside out uh, tracking like dome where there's hundreds of cameras and like sort of an array in a dome that could take multiple angles of the same uh, very very like high end cinematic technologies, including a lot of AR and VR stuff too. So Mark had started ICT, and then he was a professor for years at USC. And then when I was at USC, he was on sabbatical at Microsoft. But he came to this class and did like a guest lecture, and it was some people are just like natural born educators and like they're so interesting. You're just like hooked on every word they're saying. Very charismatic, very like just good at educating, like good at making you curious about whatever they're talking about. Mark is one of those guys. He's just sort of this mad scientist, like incredibly brilliant guy that's so passionate about everything that he was talking about. And I just remember being like kind of enraptured by this guy and like wanting to know more about wanting to learn from him, basically like wishing that he was still a professor so I could take a class of his. But we kept in touch after graduating, and I kind of had it stuck in my head when I saw the first few of his lectures, like I would love to work for him one day in some capacity because I think I would learn a lot. And so after I graduated and I was working at these startups, I just kind of kept in touch with him to the point of like we definitely like ran out of things to say because like there's only a certain amount of time you could be like, hey, can I work? Can you give me a job like on your team? Like there's only a certain amount of times you can say that without it getting like weird. So I would just like
Sure.
make up things to talk about on our email thread. A lot of the time he wouldn't respond because he's super busy. But I just kind of kept at it for a few years.
Good for
Sort of
you,
like
man.
the ritual is like emailing Mark and just like telling them I still want to work for him in some way that's not obvious or like not super on the nose. And yeah, so I kept in touch with him. This is sort of another like example of like just trying hard and like creating your own luck sort of, because I just kept in touch with him almost to the point of annoying him probably. But eventually he did have a spot open on his R&D team at Microsoft, and he worked on a really cool optics R&D team for HoloLens, which is the Microsoft AR headset. And yeah, I kind of out of the blue, it's like one of these monthly emails. He's like, "Yeah, I think I have something that would fit finally." And so I went up there and interviewed and got this. It was sort of a dream job. Like I wasn't necessarily making a ton of money. Like it was tech, so I was making more money than I could imagine. But it wasn't like a dream job in the sense of making millions of dollars. But it was a dream job, like with the content of what we were doing. Like it was, and I got to work with Mark, and it was like exactly what I'd hoped for. I was like learning. He was uh, uh, what's it called when you study like vision?
Uh, that's a good question.
Like a physics background, but specifically with it's just I
Like
can't believe I'm forgetting.
optics,
But
something about
yeah, optics. He was an
optics.
optic, like a PhD. He wasn't like an optician, but like an optics expert. So I
Okay.
was learning a lot, and that's obviously really important in AR and VR. Is like knowing
Yeah.
the science of the eye. And um, so yeah, I was on this team. It was like me and Mark, who's a PhD, like principal engineer at Microsoft, and then like I don't know, 8 guys that were all PhDs too. So like it was me, like this undergrad film student that like barely knew enough computer science to like have an intro level Unity job. And then all these guys that have been doing it for 20, 30 years that were
Crazy.
like, you know, just absolutely brilliant guys. And so I got to sort of be the grunt in this group and like prototype. Like the one thing I did know that a lot of them didn't was Unity and like getting the hardware and software that they were working on kind of consolidated into a demo that we could show the higher ups at Microsoft. So we were for the first like I think 6 months of my job there, we were pretty much just tasked with like, okay, we have this new eye tracking technology, and we have this the prototype Hololens 2, and we have this sort of like what we think would be a marketable uh, solution for consumers or people that are in the an industry to use this, like make something out of this that we can sell, basically, that we can show why this is revolutionary. And so it was awesome. Like every month we would be working on sort of a new demo together, and sometimes we would be working on several things at once. And these guys were literal inventors. You know, they're on dozens and dozens of patents, and they're coming up with these solutions to really complex problems. And I basically got to be the guy that kind of slapped it all together. And made something that was like visually, you know, compelling, and told a story a little bit. And like if you're trying to accomplish or trying to solve this problem, here's an example of how this could this headset using these technologies could solve that problem. So it was really fun, and I was learning like every day. It was kind of a joy to. It was complicated too, because like I had my girlfriend Bella, who's now my wife, that I'd met at Daiquiri. She was in LA. She was studying for the California bar. She just got through law school and stuff, and we weren't really sure, like, 'cause it involved. This is pre-COVID, so I had to be in Seattle. I couldn't do this remotely at all, so I had to move. So that was
Mm,
complicated. We weren't really sure how we were gonna get through that, and it was a really crazy time in my life. But
tough.
I just learned. I was learning so much every day. It was hard to say no to that opportunity. And so we were long distance for a while, Bella and I, and then she eventually came up to Seattle too. But I was working at this job. It was super great. At some point, I can't remember how far along, but the Mark's team got sort of sucked into the Microsoft got this massive contract when I was there to make HoloLens for military application. Um,
Mm,
so, which isn't like, a lot of people had huge issues with that and like quit, or like said that I will quit if I'm working on a military related project. Cause it's a big difference from like doing sort of a consumer product going into like where you're literally like in a meeting with a general and they're talking about not necessarily like, how do we, you know, make this an offensive weapon or anything like that, but like, it's a whole different, it's much more
for sure.
serious, much more dry. It's not about uh, like the beautiful, you know, visual effects as much as it is like just, you know, we want a green square around this thing, like super simple, super straightforward. Uh, so it kind of like it took a lot of the magic out. I wasn't like necessarily opposed to working on a military product, like a lot of people were, but like some of the guys on my team were really upset by this. But I was still learning, and I was still like a kid, basically. So I tried it. It wasn't like necessarily boring work or anything, but it did it took out a lot of the X factor that I was really loving about the job prior to that.
Hmm.
And I sort of found myself like I had a little bit of excess creativity going. Like I had like no vehicle for like sort of expressing the creativity that I'd sort of fallen in love with back in that first creative coding class.
Mhm.
And I was more skilled at the time, so like I I felt finally like I was capable of making really cool things, but then my job wasn't fulfilling all of that. And so again, very coincidentally, this was like this contract happened. I wasn't being as creative as I wanted to at work, and so I started making. I think it was literally a New Year's resolution in like end of 2019 or something, or 20 like January 1st, 2020. Like, I'm gonna make an Instagram, and I'm just gonna put like I'm gonna make stuff in my free time, whatever that is, like sort of hardware and software experiments. Not necessarily like a generative art Instagram, but just sort of like a prototyping Instagram. And I don't up until that point, I'd always been kind of scared of. I hated I or I didn't. I had no social media presence. I hadn't ever felt. I never liked being exhibitionist or like showing, like even in like, you know, perspective 101 drawing class. I didn't really like showing the stuff I made. I was always like very, I think a lot of people struggle with that. It's like when you paint a picture or draw a picture, it's kind of hard to show it to people because that opens you up. It's a very it's a sensitive subject. It's like
Yeah.
you made this, and then when you show it to somebody, they could say they don't like it, and that's scary. And so I'd always kind of been like that. I'd always I grew up very encouraged to pursue the arts. My mom's a graphic designer and my dad's a printer. So they're both involved with art commercially. and I drew every day, I painted every day, like, every day after school. When in grade school, I'd go to my mom's office and lay on the floor and draw, and she has, like, trunks full of my old drawings and stuff, and it was always my kind of my favorite thing in life is, like, sitting down and drawing, or when I was a kid, at least, it was I loved art class, I loved all that, so I'd always been that's always been part of my subconscious is like I've never really stopped making art at any point, but at this time in my life when I was kind of starved of the creative aspect of my job, it was the first time in my life that I had the tools to make cool digital hardware related art, and I wanted to use it as an excuse or as a chance to sort of overcome the insecurities I felt about showing the things I made to people. So I made an Instagram, or I think I had an Instagram, but I deleted the 3 or 4 photos of her or whatever I had on it and started making these one-off kind of like explorations with either code or specific hardware or a combination of both. And again, I think this is like January 1st, 2020. So right before the pandemic, I decided to. It might have been I don't know, it might have been the year before. I can't remember, but I think no, it was before I left LA. So must have been the year before. Like I wanted to make more digital art and show it to people, and so I made this Instagram, and then at least in the next couple years, that's when the pandemic happened, and so I had again, sort of in the right place at the right time, I built a little bit of an audience on Instagram with some of the stuff I was making. And then you have the pandemic, you have the NFT boom of late 2020, early 2021. And I have like a little bit of a foothold with like people that are into digital art on Instagram, which is sort of the people that ended up getting into NFTs. So I had, if I had made the Instagram a year later or 2 years later, it would have been too late. I don't know. But that's also like, I just sort of, I didn't want to necessarily do like every day as like people, but I wanted to just exercise that muscle a little bit more because I wasn't doing that at work. And so I took the stuff I was making for Instagram once I got a little bit more disillusioned with what I was doing at work. Not disillusioned, but like bored, I guess. That's when I started going harder in my uh, Instagram, I guess, for lack of a better word, like just like making stuff and sharing it, and then NFTs took off, and so I had sort of a surplus of ideas and simulations and digital art leaning things, generative art leaning things, either made or things that I wanted to make, and then I had for the first time like an ability to sell it, which was super crazy. And so yeah, I that like the that I guess it would be early 2021. Sterling actually from Daiquiri, he got one of the foundation invites, like one of the really early ones. He somehow knew one of the founders or whatever of foundation, and so he sent me a foundation invite. I think like the first week the foundation was online, and so I
Crazy.
my very first thing, my first NFT was like one of these things I made for Instagram that I was like, oh, this would be cool to see if I could sell it for $50 or whatever. And so I put it on foundation, and I didn't get any bids all day. And then that night, there was like a bidding war for it, and it was just the most insane. I stayed up all night watching this. It was like the most, because I think it expired at like midnight, but then it ended up going to like 4 in the morning or whatever. And
Okay.
for like I can't remember what ETH was at the time, but like 10 ETH or 15 ETH or something, which was like I like so
That's
out of
crazy.
like
Wow.
I mean, it was probably like one of the best nights of my life because it was so unexpected and so crazy. And I sold it, and I like woke up Bella and I was like, I just sold this for 30 grand or whatever. And she like didn't, she's like started screaming or whatever. And it was crazy. And yeah, it was kind of because of everything that happened before. I think actually the one of the bigger things that caused that auction to start is Rafiq tweeted that he retweeted like the tweet that I had
Wow.
made about it, like, hey, I have something on foundation. And so I think right when he did that, a couple other people saw it, and that's a result of me going to the panels and talking to him, 5
Yeah.
or whatever. So it's just great. It's
So
just
crazy.
very, yeah, cumulative. Everything that you don't really realize how cumulative everything is,
Yeah.
but it is. And so I was at the right place at the right time. A couple, I wasn't like going to quit my job at that point or anything. So it was a one time thing, but I was like wow, I should have maybe took this more seriously. Like instead of just throwing something up on Foundation that I'd already made, maybe like I should think more seriously about this. And I also from the get-go kind of like it was I think a lot of people had the same feeling like how is this real? Like how like this can't actually be sustainable, and ultimately it kind of wasn't, but right from the beginning I was like this is too good to be true. Like the fact that I can make digital art and make money from it is like for some reason in my head, unless you're working for a corporation doing it in sort of a corporate sense, like I was doing, I didn't really see how this could like how I could be a full-time artist doing this. And but yeah, over the next few weeks, few months, I sold a few more NFTs. I had like, you know, I'd paid off my student loans that were pretty sizable at the time. That was a really good feeling. I, you know, was this was like right around the stay-at-home order started too. So like I was like increasingly like the potential of making art a career was getting bigger, as well as me being stay-at-home, which meant I was even more disconnected with my like the one thing I really missed about my job was that I got to go in and see people, see my friends, and like talk and hang out at the water cooler, so to speak, and go to lunch with them and sort of have that social component, and that was removed. And so at that point, I had almost no like passion for what I was doing at work. Whereas I had this huge opportunity in spring of 2021 to like maybe make a go of being a full time artist. And so I think like April came around. I'd sold a couple more, not for as much as the first, but I had like maybe 6 months of savings, like where I could pay rent, pay the bills, pay for food, you know, still have a life. And not, and I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll quit and see if I can make it 6 months. And if I make it 6 months, then maybe I'll see if I can make it another 6 months and sort of just like ride it until the wheels fall off. And yeah, that was like, you know, 5 years ago or whatever. So it's almost 5 years. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, and the wheels still haven't fallen off. So that's good.
Cool,
But
man.
yeah, that was sort of
Still,
the
yeah, that's
transition.
okay. Yeah. So that's the transition for you. So this is before your release with ArtBlocks, correct?
Yeah. So
Yeah. So maybe talk about that, releasing your first long form collection with
yeah,
ArtBlocks.
that's called Chimera, still life project. That was like so another sort of byproduct of having making that Instagram sort of at the right place at the right time is I discovered a lot of other artists that were interested in the same thing I was. So like I'm you know I followed Beeple, I followed Thank You X, I followed Dimitri, I followed Tyler. I sort of got more plugged into the like I was already sort of plugged into the LA digital art scene, but I had no idea who was making art in New York, who was making art in Texas. I didn't know. And so Instagram sort of um helped me meet other artists that were interested in the same things. And I think I met I think or we didn't meet, but I think I followed Dimitri and he followed me or something, and I was always liking his pictures and vice versa, or sketches and vice versa and stuff. And so I had like very loose dialogue with these artists prior to NFTs being a thing. Like I remember in like late 2020, Ryan, Thank You X was like basically like, hey, have you heard about these NFT things? And I was like, no, not really. And so we were like have this like chat from when he was like kind of starting to get into it, when he did it like before he did his Nifty Gateway drop and stuff. So there was sort of this like cloud of conversation about NFTs going on that started very slowly in 2019 or 2020, sorry, for me. And and then there was another sort of subsequent discussion when ArtBlocks came out in 20 late 2020, because I know Dimitri had the Ringers release, and I knew a few other artists that were interested in generative art at the time that were uh, exploring ArtBlocks as a platform. And for some reason, I didn't really like. I don't know. I didn't really like the biggest thing were like sales weren't that high at the beginning, so I didn't really like. I didn't see a huge difference between doing something on Foundation or Super Rare and doing something on ArtBlocks. Kind of other than exposure, like, and I was like, why? Like, I've had really good luck on Foundation the last 2 or 3 releases, so I'm gonna make stuff for Foundation. And I didn't really connect like I knew that ArtBlocks was on chain, but it hadn't clicked for me at all that how incredible that aspect of it was, and how different that is from having something on uh what's it called? I don't even remember anymore. Like the
Is it IPFS? Is that what it
yeah,
is?
IPFS. Um So, yeah, it hadn't clicked quite. This is like I'm talking like late 2020. It hadn't clicked yet. Early 2021, I started like I actually had one of the guys that bought. I think that he bought my second NFT. His name's Matt. He messaged me and said like, I know that you make generative art. Like you should check out this platform called ArtBlocks. His M4T is his handle. I think he was a really big early ArtBlocks collector. I haven't seen active too much anymore, but yeah, he bought one of my foundation pieces and he started talking to me about art blocks and the fact that I should look into it. And that, and this is springtime 2021, that instigated a conversation with Dimitri about his experience with art blocks. Because Matt was like, you should talk to, like, if you know any of the artists that released anything, talk to them, see how you could get involved. And then Dimitri got me in touch with Jeff Davis. And this is before there was an application process or anything with Art Blocks. I think it was more of like an email, like, "Hey Jeff, I'm a generative artist. Can I make a project for Art Blocks?" Basically, and he was like, "Yeah, make something and send it to us, and we'll like review it." I'm not sure if there was like a curated or playground delineation yet. This is like early. This is maybe April or May of 2021. I can't remember what was their platform was at the time, but it must have been, there must have been curated. But anyways, I at the time, like I so I had this conversation going with Jeff. There's sort of an open invite to make something and send it to them, and it would be reviewed by the curation board or whatever was going on at the time. Um, and also at the time, I had signed a contract to do like I was freelancing a little bit too. And this is probably the biggest regret I have in life is I signed a pretty a freelance gig that was like quite a bit of work, and it was well paid and everything, but like it was during like May and June of 2021 when I probably would have been working on that Art Blocks project that I started the dialogue with Jeff about. And then come July and August, that's when Art Blocks went absolutely nuclear, and I had only just started working on my Art Blocks project. Not that it's like all about money or anything, but I spend a long time, like way too long on making anything really. So by the time I started, like I had like, you know, another 5 months at least of work on Chimera before it was ready. At the time, I didn't know how long it was going to take, but it took a long time. But anyways, it was sort of like that was the last freelance thing I did because I've been super fortunate in that I haven't had to do freelance work anytime recently. But the end of that summer was when I started Chimera, and that's when ArtBlocks blew up. And I worked on. I wanted to do at the time. At the time I initially started the conversation, and then I think up until the time I started working on Chimera, there hadn't been any figurative ArtBlocks projects. They were all abstract. I think the closest thing were geometry runners,
Right.
like the blocks.
Yeah.
That
Irish
was
Floored.
Yeah, yeah. That was somewhat figurative, but it wasn't like flowers or a house or like something that was you know, visible in reality. So I approached it right from the get-go from that angle. It's like, okay, generative art it really excels at abstract art, and and combining really complex abstractions together and colors together and randomness together, but it also can be figurative. And so I wanted to do from the get go something that was figurative. And that's sort of like, that was the first thing that informed my decision to pursue still life. But still life also is like, I specifically chose still life because it's sort of this genreless thing that's existed in art for forever, since the like hieroglyphics basically. It's like there's there's and then pre-Renaissance art, it's like uh, there's like the final product, and then you have all the body of work from an artist that is honing their craft and practicing, trying to get better at a certain technique or whatever. And that's sort of what still life was, is like a way of practicing or prototyping the final output. So even before, like, still life eventually, post Renaissance uh, became a subject in itself. Like you see tons of still life in museums and stuff, but usually um, prior to still life becoming subject matter in itself, it was used as a form of prototyping, which is sort of how I identified with what I did at work, with what I did with art, with what I did with my experiments. It was all prototypical, and so that was another sort of foundational aspect of Chimera. Is I wanted it to be um, sort of exploring, like, still life has existed in every single, like, genre of art as it's come for centuries. There's an element of every genre of art that incorporates still life, and so we have this new genre, a new platform, a new technology of blockchain art, and I wanted to make something that was that pulled still life into this new generation of digital art. And so, and it was figurative. So those kind of both check the boxes, and it also, like, reflects on my own background as a prototyper, and using some process of creation as a form of getting better technically, which is what I was, I tried to do a lot of, like, I wanted Chimera to be 3D. I wanted it to be hidden in some way. I really, like, I look back at, like, everything I've learned since doing Chimera. I wish I could go back and do like a 2.0 almost, and like spruce it up, because I know so much more now, and that's sort of like the kind of the red thread that's through my whole education and professional experience, and art making experience, is just like getting better and like learning more. Like, I've, like, from what I said way earlier about, like, when I got back into community college in 2013 or 2014 or whatever that was, I sort of discovered this passion in learning and getting better, and at a specific thing, and that's never really left. I still, I want to develop, I want to learn, I want to gain skills and knowledge about specifically art making now, but really anything. I love learning, and so Chimera became an excuse to learn more about some really advanced techniques that I still use today and stuff. But yeah, I wanted it to be three-dimensional. I wanted a lot of the art blocks at the time. They were static or two-dimensional. There were obvious exceptions to that, but I wanted to put something on art blocks that didn't that hadn't, you know, been explored yet. That was sort of another, like, I wanted to innovate in a small way, like uh, what people thought of, like at the time, maybe people thought that generative art had to be abstract, and I wanted to do something figurative, or that it could be sort of in this weird 2.5D space, 2.5 3, like, explorable, interactive. It doesn't have to be static. It doesn't have to be, even if it's animated, you can like zoom in and out. You can kind of explore the scene a little bit more in like a sort of a video game-esque way. But yeah, that's, I tried to hit it from like all these angles, and it took a long time, and it didn't release until January of 2022. But it completely changed my life for sure. Like, obviously, the, like, meeting, like, everybody that's involved with ArtBlocks, going to Marfa. I didn't go to Marfa in 2021, but I went in 2022, and I've been every year since then. And it's just sort of been, I mean, I have like a Chimera. There's one right there. I have like one in every room in our house. It's just such a foundational part of like my life, and it was the gateway to, like, basically, like, I don't know, like, that was sort of what carried, like, when I had made that original deal of, like, okay, I got 6 months of savings, and I can make it. If I can make it there, then I can make another six. Like, I needed something in that at the end of that 6 months, and Chimera was that. Like, and it was so much more than that too. Like, like I said, I've just made like, art blocks, and being associated with art blocks at that time has just like expanded my social circle. It's given me friends. It's given me, like, everything. Like, I owe a lot to those months, and being involved with art blocks at that time. It was complete magic, and I'm so grateful that happened. But yeah, it was a sort of a, again, coincidental step by step way in, and that's how it happened.
So interesting, man. I remember when Chimera was released. That was for sure a very interesting moment in time because it was such a different type of collection that I had seen someone do with long form generative algorithm. Um, and I remember I shot you a message, I think, and I had just DM'd you and I was like, huge congrats on the release. And I remember just saying like, this is like one of the most awesome, collections that I've seen released to date. And yeah, it was I think it was extremely well done. And it's so cool to hear you talk about it because especially linking it back, kind of to, your earlier years and kind of how your first long form collection was something like this. And even hearing some of the backstory behind, kind of like still life and what that represents kind of like from your perspective. And something I wanted to kind of mention too is that you released like years later, I think this is in August of 2024, you released something on ArtBlocks Studio called Precursor.
Oh yeah,
And that,
yeah. I'm surprised you knew about it and like post about that or anything, but
yeah, so I'm just kind of curious if you can talk about that because that's kind of like a precursor algorithm to Chimera, but it was
yeah,
just
no,
released.
literally, it's like I use when I'm testing locally, or rather when I'm ready to like share something I'm working on that's not it's not in a finished state. I upload it to there's a SAS company called Tiny Host, I think, or something. But basically, you can upload a zip file and it puts it online. And so it's a really easy way to have hosting and a URL really quickly if you need to share of like if I wanted to share what my current project I'm working at with you on in the browser, I can upload it and then you can see all the files that are relevant. But anyways, because I zip, you have to zip something in order to get it onto this website sharing platform. I have like it's kind of doubled as sort of like a great archival process because like I have like like 200 for Chimera that were from basically the beginning of me sharing it with like Bella, who's on her laptop or whatever. I can just drag a zip there, but it isolates that moment in time where the project was. And basically, I should preface this with saying like the most at least or the most beginning level capable software developer would use GitHub, which is like what I guess we used it nonstop at work and stuff. But for some reason, this is just more of an anecdote, but when I started making generative art uh, as a hobby before, sort of like during the Microsoft days, uh, I hated I didn't want to do anything that I did at work, I guess. So I stopped using GitHub. And what I was explaining about the zip files is essentially what GitHub does is it saves versions of things. So you can save your progress through a code base, and you can go back to a certain date at a certain time, and it's very efficient and it's very incredible technology to be able to like go back in time and look at something or revert to that or whatever. I don't know if you're familiar with GitHub, but sort of a foundational aspect of any kind of software development. And that's what me zipping the files essentially does is it locks code at a certain time and I'm able to archive that. But yeah, when I started writing code to make generative art outside of work, I used, and pretty much to this day, I only use a text editor. I don't have like a crazy Visual Studio environment or anything set up. It makes it sort of hard to collaborate with me because I just have like an HTML and a JS file. And I don't have any sort of presence on GitHub, or I can if I need to. But I have a kind of an analog approach almost to like writing code, which is a little bit masochistic too, because like I don't use. Actually, I have used AI to like write bits and solve problems and stuff, but I haven't used like Claude in Visual Studio Code or anything yet. I'm purposely sort of trying to stay away from that. This is again a little bit of a tangent, but anyways, I'll get back to the question. The precursor is a moment in time really early on. I think it might be before it came from when I initially approached Jeff like, I think it was before that freelance job. And it was when I initially approached Jeff, and he's like, make something and show it to us, and we'll give you feedback on it. And so I made the very beginnings of Chimera, which is like a line renderer. You can look it up probably on any of the wallet or like yeah, you can like go. I think it might show up on my Deca or another art exploring platform. But shoot, what was I saying? Oh, it's kind of like a line renderer. I initially started as an orchid generator, and so I was gonna only have orchids in this sort of still life. It's very simple compared to like the final Chimera, but it's this kind of flowy line rendering orchid. It's sort of orchid-esque generator, and it was just one of my first stabs at doing something on chain, and it was the first time I'd worked with like the exact format that you need to upload to ArtBlocks and stuff. And I must have sent it to the ArtBlocks team in the form of like one of these links, and just to see what their feedback was. And I think the feedback was like, it's not great. Like keep working on it. It's not
Really?
like ArtBlocks level yet. And I wasn't expecting it to be either. It was just sort of, I wanted to show them the direction I was headed. So yeah, that what you see as the NFT, Chimera Precursor, is that very early example of Chimera, before it was called Chimera or anything. And I sold that to as sort of a part of or it might have even been a gift, but when I sold Empath to Mickey and Becky and Canvas, they wanted to see like some examples of like really early stuff I've done over the years. And so I showed them stuff I made in like way back in like that first creative coding class, anything I could find from years ago. And I was like, oh, maybe that's interesting to them too, to show them like one of the early forms of Chimera, and they love that. So it's not my favorite. It's certainly not something I want to be associated with in terms of like my skill level, because it's pretty rudimentary, but it's cool to see the progression for sure. And you can obviously tell that it's flowers. It's the beginning of what would become Chimera. But yeah, that's why that's on there. Is I used ArtBlocks engine to like formally tokenize it, and then I sent it to Mickey and Becky.
Oh, that's so cool, man. And then I guess ink as well. That's kind of
Yeah,
maybe
ink was
another one.
that first creative coding class. That was like the final project in that at the end of
Cool.
the semester. So that was like the progression of my skill in 2016 or whatever.
It's so
And
cool, man.
also
So
like half of that is not even my code. It's like stuff from online, from forums and stuff. But
yeah, I think you gave a shout out to the coding train or
yeah,
something
yeah,
like that on. Cool. So that's awesome. So then you minted those ArtBlocks Studio in August of 2024. So that's cool. Thanks for
yeah,
sharing that. And then I guess just kind of like linking back. So, okay, going back. So Chimera, so you released Chimera, your first long form generative collection. You're now an ArtBlocks curated artist. And I think after that, I think that the next collection that you released was Tectonics. Do you know if that
no,
makes
actually,
sense?
it was Parnassus, the bright moments.
Oh, it was. Oh, right, in April. Right. So yeah. So talk about that a little bit and what that was like releasing with Bright Moments.
Yeah, that's again, it was like the everything's cumulative. Bright moments eventually, uh, like I consider them family. Like I spent so much time with those guys and girls, and uh Phil, Seth, like everybody involved just became really good friends of mine. And anyways, at the time, January, Chimera came out. uh Seth actually, I remember we talked. I can't remember, I should look in our DMs, but like I think Seth DM'd me in like 2019 or 2020, when he had like a very early on, he had the idea for digital art gallery, so to speak, for a long time. I think he's a serial entrepreneur, and he's always thinking about new technology and new things. And I want to say we had a conversation in very early, like before I'd heard of NFTs, and it might have even been before they were kind of in the lexicon at all. But he messaged me, and I think he wanted to start. He said that I have an idea to start a sort of a pop up digital art gallery in Venice, and I was in LA at the time, and you're making cool digital art, so I was just wondering if you like wanted to do something together at some point. And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. And then we kind of like fell out of touch or whatever, but we had that again, sort of like an early on semi relationship on Instagram before the NFT world took off. And so I had, I had his name in my Rolodex for a long time, and then after Chimera came out, is Bright Moments had started, and it had been, smashing success, and there's the heist and all the crazy stuff that happened in late 2021 with Bright Moments, and then they had started doing the city series, where they were going around the world and doing the 10,000 crypto citizens. And speaking of which, I think I got a hoodie from the
Oh,
Venice show here. Um,
hey, let's
but
go.
the next city show after Venice and New York was Berlin, and we might have talked during the Chimera process, like about doing something at one of the city shows. I knew what their plan was with that, but it was the first time that I was done with Chimera. I had sort of an empty slate. I didn't have any like immediate plans to do any specific project. I think I think Berlin was in February, if I'm not mistaken. It was like pretty fast turnaround, but Seth, or maybe it was April. I think it might have been April. But anyways, I had like a pretty short amount of time to put something together. But he invited me to he invited me to be one of the Berlin artists, and I saw like, him and Phil, we had like a Zoom call, and they were showing me the deck of Kraftwerk in Berlin, which is the venue that the show was at. And like those, especially those, every Bright Moments city show that I'd been to at least, and I'm sure the other ones as well, were incredible for their own, like all their own reasons. Berlin was like all about scale and like the environment, like of being in this old nuclear factory or whatever the hell it was, this old energy factory. Very like industrial and very German, very like pre, before the wall came down, sort of feel like all the control panels and stuff was like everything looks so Soviet and cool and brutalist and everything. But I was like totally, it was like it just looked awesome, and it was the first time that I'd ever um been approached or like kind of started daydreaming or imagining what it would be like to show art physically, because like I'm still very much like, working through this like fear of exhibitionism, and like talking to like it was kind of scary for me to imagine. It was one thing to like release something online and have maybe somebody on Twitter say this is ugly or whatever, but it's like a whole other thing to like, I don't know, to like sell or to make art, to try to sell it, to be there in person in the flesh and like meet people that you're like, that are consuming your art. That was like a whole nother level of that I hadn't experienced yet. Like I was used to posting something on Instagram. I was used to maybe minting something from my desk at home. But it just seemed like sort of the next right step. And the fact that I love Seth, and I was getting to know Phil, and I love Phil, and like everybody on the Bright Moments team were like relative strangers at the time. It was kind of it was a scary undertaking. Um, but I'm so grateful that Seth reached out about Berlin specifically, and I got involved with that. And I think that at the time they'd rented, it was 10 artists, like I think it was at every show, but every Bright Moment show, but it was spaced over like 10 or 5 weeks, I think. So like it was a really long show, and every week, or every weekend rather, it would be two artists for the entire venue at Kraftwerk.
Huh.
And my weekend was shared with Jeff, I think. And so he had like
Oh,
the Friday night, and I had a Saturday night, or he had Saturday and Sunday or something like that. But um, yeah, it was we like I did I also I based the project on Paul Klee. Like I needed to come up. It was a really short turnaround, and I had to come up with an idea right away. And Paul Klee, I don't think he's German uh, by birth, but I think I mean, I know that he taught at like Bauhaus, and
yeah.
he's one of my favorite painters, and he's super formative, like a very fundamental uh, artist in terms of the computational art and sort of the pixel art aesthetic. And there's a bunch of reasons I chose him, mostly because I love his work, but I wanted to do something that was a little bit like it was like, okay, who's my favorite, at least German associated artist? It's Paul Klee. Um, his work is already naturally like linkable to geometric and abstract generative art. There's an inherent connection there. So it's kind of a low hanging fruit. Like, okay, I got to pick an idea and go with it. And so I'm going to do something that we would do in that creative coding class and a couple classes I had after that, where we would try to emulate the style of a famous artist using code. And so it's a really nice way to learn and like think about things a little bit less black and white. Like if I'm trying to make a curved line that looks like a Klimt line or something, like how do I accomplish that with code? And so I just kind of grabbed that idea. I took this idea of this process of early creative coding education, like trying to emulate the style of another living artist with code. That also is a little bit more of like my digital arts typically is fairly skeuomorphic. Like I love um, trying to capture the essence of an organic and real and physical movement or line or shape or technique. I really enjoy the process of trying to decode that and then encode that in computational art. A lot of the work I've made to date is like trying to emulate a paintbrush stroke or a pencil line or I don't really like there. I remember like a year or two there was this big debate whether generative art should try to be skeuomorphic. And do you remember that when that happened? Like people were like arguing about. I thought it was so dumb.
Yeah.
Um, like if it's like if skeuomorphic art is like if we should be doing that with like computers have their own aesthetic. And I don't know, I think it's like there's no greater challenge than trying to it's literally trying to fit like a round peg in a square hole. Like computer is not made to make things look
Yeah.
organic, and so it's just a natural challenge to try to accomplish that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a really interesting tension between like the aesthetics, the like cold, hard, straight line, right angle, sort of like the things that computers are really good at versus like nothing in nature is right angled. We can say it is because it looks generally right angled, but like there's always chaos in everything, and there's always there's no two animals that are exactly alike. There's like nothing that's exactly the same or perfectly straight. So I think there's just this
For
really
sure.
cool give and take there, but that's a little bit of a tangent. But yeah, Parnassus became like another huge, massive step in my development, and I, created the project just like I'd created most of the generative art that I'd done at the time at my desk at home. But then instead of, you know, putting it on ArtBlocks or putting it on Foundation, it went to Bright Moments, and I got to fly to Berlin. So such a special week in my life because it was like the very first time I'd ever uh, as far as I can remember, exhibited anything publicly, maybe besides like a high school art fair sort of situation, but like actually have like a venue and like have a huge amount of effort behind it from the company that put it on. And the public, anybody could come in the door and look at it. It was also coupled with like most Bright Moments events, like other things like food and music. And um, as luck would have it, I can't remember his name, but there was like this super OG famous techno a DJ from Berlin, a local Berliner that he was like a huge up and coming DJ in like the early aughts or something. He was like an older guy. I think he was like 40 or 50. He was this big up and coming musical act, and then he started. I think he got what's it called when you have seizures from lights?
Epileptic. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Like
think he
epilepsy.
was epileptic, and so he had this like super ill-timed but mandatory retirement essentially from like making music and or at least showing it live, and super sad. And so he kind of like I think he was like from the story that I remember from people from Berlin, he was like this up and coming guy. He all of a sudden kind of vanished. And the week that I had my show was like his first week playing music again in like a decade or whatever, 15 years. And so there's this huge crowd there, and initially I thought it was for for my art, but it wasn't. It was for this guy. It was still really cool because like there were just like I don't know 2,000 people at Kraftwerk like partying, and then all the like Parnassus was like everywhere, and it was like the most surreal,
Wow.
crazy thing. Couple of the fact that people were live minting, and that was the first time I'd ever done that, and that was like sort of what closed the circle. Like I was like, okay, this is something that could be here to stay. Like this is so awesome. Like taking it out of uh off the computer, like when you're in real life and having conversations with people that are live minting, and seeing the Parnassus are very additive, so like you see it over the course of like 30 or 60 seconds kind of take shape
Yeah.
and form. Watching that with the person that had minted it was really fun. If anybody's been to a Bright Moment show, you know how fun they are for like many reasons, and that Kraftwerk and the Berlin show were it was probably my favorite show. Even if I wasn't an artist there, it was just like it was so cool to be there and to see it was just dark and brutalist, and they had like the uh, um, uh, they had rituals set up in the like took this like super sketch elevator up to the top floor of this enormous building, and they had like it was sort of like alien cathedral situation, and the rituals sound bath going, and everything's like
Oh yeah.
reverberating off these
Cool.
huge concrete walls. It was just so cool.
Oh wow, that must
and
have been so
and
cool. Yeah.
and for like more personal reasons, just like uh, going to Berlin with one of my best friends. Like it was we went to Prague after. Had like
Cool.
it was just so like I had Chimera was such a weird and amazing, but also like and it took a lot out of me, and it was so bizarre watching floor price stuff and like feeling the pressures of like I don't know, ceiling. I'm not certainly not complaining, but like I think every artist that sold on ArtBlocks at the time was probably familiar with these feelings. But just like seeing the art that you made as like a financial vehicle, and like people yelling at me because the floor price is going down, it was like so stressful and weird and just like bizarre. To like I or rewind a year, I was like a Microsoft employee that didn't really like share art or like certainly not sell art to people, and like then fast forward a year and I'm like I don't know, like treated as like the CEO of a company whose stock is going down sort of,
Yeah.
or
Right.
going up, some weeks going up, and it was great, but like I was just very up and down. It was a very volatile like time in my life, and also an incredible time, but Berlin was like a reset sort of, and like I was able to
Cool,
like
man.
realize like how much more this is than floor prices and stuff. And like it was my first, that's why I've gone to like every event I possibly can, including most recently Node, like seeing
Mm.
the people that I'm friends with now, that I just met for the first time in Berlin. Like me and Phil I'm having a kid in a couple weeks with my wife, and Phil just had his kid with his wife. We had the same due date, which is kind of crazy. Theirs came pretty early, but we have this like deep friendship now, and like we're not blood related, but we're family, and like and it's all because I've started going to these in person events, and um I don't know. That was when it clicked, when it was like beyond the sort of like the cool aspects of live minting, like from like a art consumption point of view, just like the fact that these are everybody that's on Twitter that's retweeting my stuff or liking my stuff or commenting on my stuff. They're real people like you. Like you DM me, I had no idea who you were. Like when we met, it's like cool. Like you realize like there's a face behind every one of these avatars, and it became way less of like a disconnected digital thing to uh, an actual like form of art and like a form of like community, the surrounding, like something, a shared interest. And that was my first exposure to it, was Berlin. And that's really when it sort of took off. Like I certainly, I've never wanted to get out of whatever I was in at that time. Like I wanted to just keep build it, keep making cool things, keep meeting people, keep going to these events, um keep pushing like this, because it became a community. It went from like a sort of an occupation and this novelty to like something that um, both technologically and spiritually like has like long term, like I can see this being like a long term thing. And so yeah, Berlin was really special for that.
Wow, that's so cool, man. And I know I saw it on your website. I think there is a shot where it's like it's dark. I think it's probably this DJ that you were talking about that was up on stage, and this massive, I guess, projection screen in the background with
Yeah,
one of the
Parnassus.
Parnassus in the
Yeah,
background. So that
That
must have
was
been
like that was like
surreal.
me, like, being like, "What the hell is going on?" Because like, that it all happened like, I think it was a one-night show, or it might have been a two-night show, but, like, I land in Berlin, and I pretty much go and like, we landed at night, I slept, I woke up, I went to craft work, and, like, all of this was, like, built and made already, and, like, I really, even though I'd seen, like, a pitch deck about the venue, I had no idea the scope and, like, the amount of people there, and it was just, like, I had never felt imposter syndrome like that because like, it all the things I'm describing about, like, I don't know, like, the scale of that show and the scale of it just felt so different than me sitting behind a desk and clicking a button, it was, like, super overwhelming, and and that,
Crazy.
like, all the not to mention all the people that were minting or consuming the art, but, like, the whole Bright Moments team, it's like 50 people. Everybody's like at the door, like I'm meeting everybody all at once. I had no idea who Phil was, in the like if I had to pick him out of a lineup or whatever, because all I've seen are avatars on Twitter or whatever. So it was just like
Mhm.
a whirlwind experience. But yeah, it was a super formative one, and it was awesome. And
Dude,
I
that's
tried to go to every Bright Moment show after that. I didn't make it to all of them, but I made it to most, and they were just I miss it a lot. Like those were another sort of rally point, I think, in our years, like having one or two of those city shows every year, and it was a really every single one I went to was like just fantastic.
yeah, man. You know what? Let's jump ahead. The Bright Moments finale. So that was in March of 2024. So this is like a couple years later after this release that you had in Berlin. So what was that like? That was in Venice, and that was kind of like their last kind of event. So what was that like?
Um, the the collection itself just technically speak or not technically, but like the thematically is if you look at like I'd never been to Venice before, so I was looking at I think literally just like Google images of Venice and like seeing if there was something I could glean from I was familiar with like the general aesthetic there, but I tend to look at architecture a lot to like get inspired. Like architecture is very geometrical, and it's sort of an easily digestible. Like I can imagine. I can't imagine like trying to program like Starry Night, but I can imagine trying to like write the script that generates like a brutalist building because it's like it's right angles and it's like a little bit easily digestible. So a lot of the time when I'm trying to mood board essentially for like a new project, I'll look at buildings for some reason, especially if it's geographically based like Berlin was, or like Metropolis was a really good example. Like I
Yeah.
looked at a lot of imagery from the different cities, Metropolis. But yeah, finale. I was looking at pictures of Venice, and the biggest sightseeing place there is the square with I can't remember the name of the cathedral, but the extremely ornate, beautiful facades in the side, like carvings in the side of whatever church that is in the main square, and so if you look at my finale project and pictures of this cathedral, they're fairly aesthetically similar. They're like I wanted mine to look a little bit like stone, like marble, like a light colored marble, catching some like colored reflections from the colorful tourists that are standing next to it with indirect lighting and stuff. And yeah, I wanted it to be sort of like a relief and a lot of beautiful reliefs on the side of that church and the public buildings there. And so that's that front thematically, it's a pretty one-to-one. Like I just wanted to capture the essence of Venice somehow. Um, the experience holistically was a kind of a perfect bookend with like the my experience in Berlin because by the time Venice rolls around, it's been couple years, and um, I felt, the uncomfortability and like social awkwardness. I'm not like super good at meeting people and um, speaking eloquently like around stranger. Like I have a lot of social anxiety, and so like the difference between um especially in a situation that's me like presenting art, I'm just like kind of I don't know what to say. It was the first time I was doing that in Berlin. You fast forward to Venice and I'm like really good friends with almost everybody there, and I felt like part of a family. I felt like when we were watching the Bright Moments documentary, it was just like I was a small part of that story. I know all of these people fairly intimately now. I've traveled the world with a few of them. I've been to Patagonia and uh, Mexico City and LA, and I've been to all these places with these people. And um, the market's a whole different state of things in 2024 as it was in 2022, and we'd all made it through. And it was like, I don't know, it was like a perfect bookend because I felt I didn't feel a single bit of social anxiety that whole trip in Venice. And everywhere. I love the bright moments and like the sort of the Marfa-esque element of like when when it's like bright moments Paris or Marfa or Palo Alto a couple months ago. It's like we all know each other now, and it's like you go out for coffee in Venice in the morning and you see like three people. It feels like summer camp almost, and
Mhm.
that's sort of like the total opposite of Berlin, where it was like very like brutalist and cold aesthetically and dark and stuff, and I didn't know anyone. And then you have Venice, which is this bright, sunny, colorful place where I knew everybody and I felt at home and I felt like I was a part of a greater whole. And so yeah, it was a really bittersweet but really lovely ending to the Bright Moments era, or at least the first Bright Moments era. Hopefully there's more, but uh
Hopefully.
it was really special in a totally different way than Berlin was.
Wow. Yeah, I makes sense at this point. Yeah. And you also released with Bright Moment, the first Bright Moments and ArtBlocks kind of partnership. I think the release was Metropolis, right? That was
Yeah.
sandwiched in between, Berlin and Venice. So what was that like? That was a really interesting release. I remember being pretty struck by that because you had kind of this interesting approach of they mint their first kind of piece, and then they're able to mint kind of like a second piece that's part of a diptych, which I thought was a really interesting approach. I don't know if something like that had been done before. Yeah, what was that like? And kind of talk about that process a little bit too. I'm kind of
Yeah.
jumping around a little bit. I
Oh, no, that's
usually
fine.
like to go like in order like this, but I'm
It
kind of
kind of
curious.
exists, and disconnected in my brain too. I don't know when anything has happened
Okay.
the last few years. Yeah, that was, Metropolis is probably the thing I'm most proud of making the last few years. Maybe Empath was a physical and NFT piece that I made recently that took a long. I was really proud of that too. But Metropolis was kind of from start to finish like uh it was kind of a grind, like in mostly good ways. It was a long conversation. Seth Seth wanted to do something completely crazy. That was pretty much like how it started. Is like, and this was before there was like I'm still like the Art Blocks Bright Moments collaboration. Like I don't see how it's that much different than a Bright Moments show. Maybe like legally, like speaking, it's different, but like Bright Moments was powered by Art Blocks. There's always been that relationship. So in my head, it's just I don't know, like the first official Bright Moments Art Blocks. I think they were maybe had didn't like plans didn't happen as they initially intended, as time went on or whatever. But I think that was supposed to be sort of a bigger line of a bigger run of shows after Metropolis. But yeah, it was the first one of those, whatever one of those was. And Seth wanted to. We basically I think for 3 or 4 months we were just talking about doing, because they had Bright Moments had done the solo shows before, like
Yeah.
with Ben and with Tyler. They had
Yeah.
individual artist shows that they had done a few of, and I really like that too, like sort of smaller than the city shows, but devoted to one artist or one entity. And
Mhm.
I think it sort of just started out of that. Like I wanted to do a solo show. They looked really, really awesome. I hadn't been to one yet. And so I wanted to do a solo show. Seth was trying to make that happen. That was around the same time they started the conversation with ArtBlocks about doing something official that was a collaboration. And so that's what Metropolis eventually became. But yeah, over the course of a few months, we were just trying to think outside the box and do something that people that could travel to a physical space would benefit from that, like not only socially but also like somehow through the NFT. Um, we wanted to connect sort of the physical and digital aspects of Bright Moments and Art Blocks. Like Bright Moments handles physical events and Art Blocks handles the digital events, and um, we wanted it to be uh, accessible. Like instead of having one show in New York that most people couldn't go to, we decided to make it hopefully a little bit more like global. And so it was a much more expensive route, but to have 5 shows that are isolated or that are not isolated to one location. So New York, Berlin, London, Mexico City, and LA. So to hopefully get people from each one of those nodes of the world together. um that's sort of what the project was based on thematically too, was node based systems and blockchain and server technology, and having these little bits of information scattered around the world that assemble into a greater whole, kind of like also like torrent technology. Grew up downloading torrents and illegal movies and music and everything. And so I just love this idea of disconnected bits of information kind of assembling themselves at certain points in time and places in time into something. And again, I've always had an attraction towards like uh, architecture as a starting point for, and this was a perfect example of like I wanted to capture the essence of every city in a long form generative art piece. I love that the script is like insane. Like I look at the script now, it's like I have no idea what's going. Like because it's like branching, branches between all 5 cities. It's got the functionality for creating a diptych too. It's just a very complex script. And it was I'm glad AI wasn't out at that time, because I definitely wouldn't be able to understand any of it. But like it was fun to work through. It was really complicated. It was, and in the script itself, like the photo real paint renderer that I made for that, it was definitely the most technical thing I've ever done artistically. And then yeah, thematically it's very complex. Logistically it was very complex. We had 5 shows in like 9 days, I think, all around the world. So it was just
Right.
felt like being on tour. Like I have a whole new respect for musicians that tour. It was
Yeah.
just like just didn't sleep. I didn't really get to enjoy like any. We had 1 day off halfway through in London, and I remember that being like, I actually remember what I did that day, but the rest of the time it was just like, uh, you know,
Blur.
talking to people and setting up and tearing down and talking to people and setting up and tearing down. And it was fantastic though. It was so much fun. Dole and Seth and a few other people from By Moments came for the whole trip, Tyler. And yeah, I just felt like we were a band. It was great.
That's
And
so
then
cool.
the diptych part of it was really, really cool to see somebody like showing me what they minted on their phone, and then seeing the IRL mint of its counterpart happen. It was really great.
That's
Yeah,
so
it was
cool.
super fun.
And then you also did the prints, right? The physical prints with
Avant
Avant
art.
Art.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was they came by the London, or I'd talked to them. I can't. Yeah, it was before Mecha, so I hadn't done a release on Avant before. But I was
Mhm.
actually I was helping. There's a really fantastic painter and illustrator, James Jean. He's a pretty famous artist, traditional artist. And he had an Avant art. He had the idea to do something on Avant art for one of his sculptures, and he followed me on Instagram, and he saw that I was doing similar things with some of the hardware experiments I was working on at the time, just like on Instagram stories or whatever. And he's one of my favorite artists ever. Like I I've been loving his art for like 20 years probably, but he DM'd me a long time
Wow.
ago in like maybe 2018, 2019, and or 2019 probably, because that's when I was doing it. And anyways, he was like, I want to do this project with Avant Art, and I was aware of Avant Art too at the time, and I was like the craziest out of left. I had like maybe 1,000 followers at the time. I wasn't very big at all, so it was like almost starstruck type stuff. But we didn't end up doing the project with Avant. It was too technically complex, and it involved like electronics that needed to be certified, and it was being sent all over the world. So there's different it just became this rat's nest of like logistical stuff. So we didn't do the project, but I got to meet the whole Avant Art team at that time, and so I'd always had sort of a very every maybe once a year I'd talk to one of them for some other reason or run into one of them for some other reason. So they came to the Metropolis London show because they're based in the UK, and they just asked if I had anybody doing prints for that collection, and I said no, and they're like, oh, come by the shop tomorrow morning before you leave, and we'll like try to set something up really quick. And so me and Seth went out to the Avant Art printer in Tottenham, I think, and yeah, it was cool. It was a nice little. We weren't planning on that at all. It just
No
sort of happened,
way.
right? But
Dude,
yeah,
all these synchronicities that you got, eh? It's
yeah,
crazy.
it's wild.
Um, that's cool. And then that, I guess, um, so then that established that relationship that then I guess for that the subsequent collection that you released, Mecha, that was then I'm assuming intentionally you worked with Avant Art
Yeah,
for the release of those, right? So
yeah, and that was
yeah.
cool because I got to I'd been for a while interested in UV printing, and they're just exceedingly expensive to buy one. So it was sort of like there's like a few technologies like transparent OLED and UV printing, and a few things that I would love to like get my hands on, but it's too expensive to even prototype with or like to outsource. Like ACK does a lot of UV printing and textural printing. It's sort of like almost a form of 3D printing where you can layer by layer add depth to a print. And when I was there for the talking to them about the Metropolis prints, which are they're just Giclée, nice, beautiful standard prints. I saw that they had UV printers there, and then that sort of started this dialogue of like, oh, maybe I can like do something that's hypertextural in the future and use that because we didn't have time to set up the whole thing for Metropolis for Metropolis. So yeah, that sort of started that dialogue, and then like a few I don't know how maybe 9 months later is when we did Mecha, but Mecha was sort of like a almost process first project where I really wanted to make something hypertextural um, and prototype. Like it was, I think the first time that they had used the UV printers for several millimeters of depth. So there was a lot of R&D on their end that they wanted to work through and like improve upon, and then after that they were able to offer that capability to a lot of other artists. But
Mm,
Mecha was like kind of the instigation and them exploring like super deep prints.
wow.
And that was sort of a shared almost like R&D venture by both of us, is like, okay, we want to try to utilize this technology and push it to the limits. And I was like, oh, I've wanted to do that for a long time, so let's do it together. And so Mecha is sort of like the basis of the Metropolis paint algorithm, but like, on steroids and like glitched out and a bunch of like crazy transformations and stuff. But it's Metropolis is a sort of a precursor to Mecha.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. But yeah, so Mecha was I think 50 prints. Is
Yeah, I
that
think
correct?
50. Yeah.
Was this a long form release, or was it kind of like these hand selected outputs?
It was long for like I still have the Mecha script, but I curated
Okay.
yeah, they didn't have
Right.
I think they still don't have on chain capabilities at Avant Art. So it
Okay.
was, yeah, they came with an NFT, but it was not a live script.
Okay. Man, I've never seen one of these prints in person, but the pictures that I've seen look amazing. Like
Yeah,
I
they're really
just
cool. I have one.
aesthetically,
That one right there.
Oh, do you ever your background's blurred? The only thing that I could recognize back there is the meridian.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, amazing work, man. It's like I think they're stunning. So
Thank you.
that's really cool. And it's interesting that the linkage with Metropolis, and especially because you then had the prints done with them previously for Metropolis. I like that linkage a little bit. It's kind of like an evolution.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, that's cool. So then I think so. We've kind of skipped. I'm just trying to be conscious of time right now. I know that there was Tectonics. I wanted to cover that with you, and also Realization, your release with
Oh yeah.
Proof Grails 3 back in January 2023. I don't know if you want to touch on those like super quick, but I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about kind of the collections that you released after
Yeah.
Mecha.
Yeah, really quick. The
Yeah,
Tectonics was I I
September
was I don't know.
2022.
Sorry?
That was September 2022. So this is still like
Yeah,
relatively early for you in your
and it was
first
after
couple years.
I think it was just the first thing after the Bright Moment show in Berlin. I think
Yeah.
I was gonna experiment. It was like, wow, this is, I was saying earlier, like I was having these realizations after Berlin, like this could be something that isn't a bubble, isn't, this could be here to stay. Like this could be a community. This could be like a career for me. This could be everything that maybe I was doubting the year before that in 2021. Um, and Tectonics was fully self-released. It was me and I made most of the website, but Young Weekend, who was at Manifold at the time, he helped me with a lot of like the API connections with like doing the auctions and stuff on Manifold and all that. But him and I worked on the website. I obviously made the art, and it was a full on self release. I just sort of wanted to test the waters of like, do I need to rely on a platform to make a living? Do I need to, like, can I just grassroots this sort? It was sort of just another experiment, and uh, it wasn't on chain, but like minting those and um, sort of gaining an understanding of how like auction websites work. It was cool too because it was I got the idea from uh, oh shoot, I forget his name. Chuck. He's one of my. He makes really cool art. He's a guy in Chicago. He makes really. He had he what's it? Dabbed his toes in NFTs, but he had this incredible website once that had like 20 simultaneous auctions all at once, and I was like, I want to do even more. So I think I did. How many? Do you know how many? I can't even remember how many Tectonics there are. 100.
I'm not sure.
It's either
I'm
50 or
not sure.
100, I think, but um, all at once. And it was just like a total free for all. All of them were going like, they would extend 5 minutes if there was a bid, kind of like Foundation. And so it's just this like crazy hectic 2 days of 100 simultaneous auctions or 50 or however many there was. But that was really just really fun. It was kind of like uh, more of a fun project, I guess, from like I wanted to learn about every aspect of releasing something. Um and then Realization, that was like a really quick you have like we had like 3 weeks or 4 weeks to make the grails thing, so it's not like super heavily it's not a super long term project, but um obviously grails is like you don't know who made the work before buying it, and you have to guess at who made it. And one of my favorite artists, alive or dead through all of time, is Zach Lieberman. He's one of those guys that I did like a book report on back in school and stuff. And he, even though he's a little bit like, he doesn't like, he contributes so much, but says so little. Like he does almost every days, I think. He's an educator. He's started Open Frameworks, which is a C++ creative coding library that's really influential in a lot of our own educations. And he's just an all around badass, amazing guy. And he has even though he creates very diverse uh, outputs and everything he does, he has a distinct style. And I tried to make something that was Zach Lieberman-esque. I mean, it's not nearly as good as anything he makes, but I wanted people to think that it was Zach's stuff, sort of, just as a little game. And a lot of people did think it was Zach on
Oh,
Twitter.
cool.
so I succeeded, but I wanted people to think they were buying a Zach Lieberman and instead end up with just one of mine. But yeah, that
They
was
got stuck
successful.
with an MpKoz.
There's a few outputs from that I really like a lot.
Cool, man. That's awesome. And then, okay, jumping ahead, you mentioned it before, briefly, but Empath. Let's talk about that. So that was released, August 2024. I don't know if you recall, but I think the year before that, we were in Marfa. I think this was, the same year that Die with the Most Likes was doing his meat market. I think it
Yeah.
was that night. I think we were in Glitch, and, there's like food and drinks all around. So I'm pretty sure probably we're both pretty tipsy. I think that's the year that I totally lost my voice. But yeah, you do. Yeah, yeah. And I remember we were chatting, and you were telling me you're telling me about this idea that you had, this concept that you were working on, and I remember you saying, I think there's like maybe a 60% chance I can make this happen, and I was like, cool, that sounds cool. And then 1 year later, you release Empath, and it's exactly as you had kind of described to me. So explain to me that, how did you come up with this idea and just the process and the actual release of this? I
It's
think
not
that
so.
I was going to
Yeah,
say that I think that this to me is probably the most, impressive, like to me, piece
thanks.
of work, that I think that I've seen you do. But I gotta say, every single collection that you've released or piece of work that you've released has been super impressive to
Thank you.
me. But I just want to, yeah, Empath. Let's
Well,
hear about
yeah,
it.
it took, like you were saying, it took a long time. I think 15 or 16 months. It was a lot of trial and error, a lot of, I was definitely like outside of my skill set, at the beginning at least. And I wanted to, it's sort of along the same lines as Chimera was. Like, I wanted to do something that sort of expanded our collective definition of what generative art is. And so, and it's also a little bit the, the sort of disillusionment that I felt working at Microsoft, like, a, not doing as creative things, but B, like a lot of the, I'm just, despite having sort of at least the beginning of my career based in very innovative tech, I'm kind of not, I hated wearing headsets every day. I never was really a believer in VR, AR, despite like being choosing that as my career. It just, there's so many ergonomic and heat restrictions to get over with that specific technology. I maybe I'll be, you know, whatever, tortured in the future for saying this, but I hate AI. I think it's going to be the downfall of humanity. I'm not like into the singularity conspiracy theories type stuff, but I just it's like a drug. I think we're going to become too reliant on it. I think when I use AI to program, I lose all sense of my self-esteem that I gain and the problem solving and like sort of the
Mm,
human part of programming, solving problems and feeling those little bursts of serotonin, for accomplishing those things. Like, I think that we're treading on very dangerous territory here, and
yeah,
that's
I
why I try
agree.
not to use it in my work too much. It's great for planning trips or whatever, but like anything, I don't know. I'm really, really pessimistic in regards to AI. Hopefully I'm wrong. Maybe it's just me getting older and getting boomer and stuff, but I don't want my daughter to grow up in a world where she knows more synthetic people than real people. It's just so bizarre to me. Maybe that's just the
For
new
sure.
status quo and that'll be normal to them, but it's not to me. So anyways, I am sort of like, despite having a career and life kind of based in technology, I'm not an optimist. I'm not a tech optimist. And so with Empath, I wanted to make a lot of those points. Like, generative art doesn't have to be electronic. I was pretty sick of working almost primarily with displays and light producing objects, for the last few years. And Empath was, I wanted to make something that looked very digital, that looked very alive and animated, but relied on no electronics. And so, really, the only way to accomplish that is with very, at least in the case of Empath, very simple clockwork animation and kinetic, like stored potential energy, and like like getting, using weights to drive a system that creates animation. Or I'm making another Empath now, actually, that I just sold, which I'm super excited about. That's going to be improved. I learned so much making the first one. The second one's going to be a lot more. Um, a lot. I push it. Actually, I have like a little um, one. Do you see this?
Oh, wow.
Prototyping drivetrains now that are there we go. Fully
Wow.
mechanical. It's going to be more clock. It's probably going to make noise now. It's going to be more clock focused, I guess. It might even tell time. I'm not sure, but yeah, something that improves upon what I learned in the first Empath and creates even more dynamic animation. The first Empath it's just a bunch of rotating facets, is what I called them. A couple thousand. This new one is going to have some flipboard mechanics, and it's going to be a bit more dynamic. But yeah, I just think that it's the marriage between mechanical engineering and computer science and the programmatic side of my work, and trying to learn more about mechanical engineering and drive systems. And it's just all very interesting. And it's I think there's a little bit of the fact that we make computational slash digital slash generative slash algorithmic art doesn't necessitate it's like prints accomplish that. Like, I love my art prints that are behind me, and I look at them and often think that think about how much I like them, but they don't they don't have, like, generative art can be stuff that's not prints and it's not on a screen. And so that's sort of just the point I'm trying to make with Empath.
Definitely. Man, it's so impressive. It's so beautiful. Um, so yeah, excited to see whatever you release next with Empath 2 or these future kind of like versions. I think it's very impressive work. And so just to clarify, so there's like a pulley system that you have, right? That's kind of
Yeah,
connected to these
the
gears,
first
and
Empath
then
is there's two weights. It's like your grandfather clock. I shouldn't say there's two weights. There's two cords, and you attach one weight, and it pulls down one of the cords and up the other, and then you take the weight out and you put it on that one, and it does the opposite. But there's only about 10-15 seconds of animation per pull. Um, and that's what with Empath 2, that's what the main thing I want to improve upon is like the length of the animation. And the first one is a really simple pulley system, and the second one is going to be more complex. And I'm talking to uh, a mechanical engineer, contractor guy that's like helping me think through some of the stuff that I don't have the language or the skills to really think of in the first place. So yeah, he's going to help me sort of like optimize it.
very cool, man. Okay, well, you should come on the podcast when you're ready to release
Yeah,
that or any future collection. Feel free.
yeah,
Um, no, but so then your next collection that I think you released is Bokeh, right? With ArtBlocks curated. So that was in
yeah.
October 2024.
And again, that's
So
sort of
talk about that.
another like it's a light creating object, but it's not a screen. That's sort of what I was trying to do with Bokeh. Yeah, it's a series of lamps and then some semi-transparent wall sculptures that we have art. Like, I was encouraging people to put them in front of windows because watching the light come through them is really pretty. But yeah, I'm again just playing with that idea that generative art doesn't have to be on a screen to be dynamic, to use light in an interesting way. Um,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
very cool, very cool. And I know when I was in Marfa, I think last year, they had some that were up in the Art Blocks house. So you have the wall sculptures that are kind of just framed on the wall, really beautiful, and then the lamps themselves, I think, are really yeah, like a really interesting piece to have like in your house. I would love to have one here. Sadly I don't have one. But really beautiful work, and something that's super unique. I don't really see many people that are actually um you know using generative art in that kind of way. So I think it's a really interesting perspective that I think that you have, and I think you're creating a lot of really interesting work.
thank you.
So
I
yeah,
think there will be more. Like, I'm really excited about. That's another reason that I did Bokeh and was excited about it was the buying experience of like I can't wait for the day when you're like on, a furniture website and you can hit refresh and like see different, like, I don't, a set of chairs doesn't all have to be exactly the same chair, they could be species that look they look like they're from the same species, but they're all different. I think that's with generative manufacturing and new like parametric manufacturing that's coming out. I think in 5-10 years it'll probably be kind of commonplace to be able to customize the stuff that you buy for your house. And so Bokeh was another sort of exploration of that too.
Yeah, for sure. I think what's the tram? Some of
Yeah,
the
exactly.
the work that's been released with tram.
So cool.
I love the Aranda Lash, the bistro chairs.
Yeah, those are awesome.
Those are super cool. And then of course the work with Martin Grasser,
Yeah, I think a code.
and
Yeah,
yeah, there's been some pretty cool examples of that. But yeah, man, that's great. And then I guess the after that was the Tessellations release that you did. We already talked about that. That was at Art Basel, another incredible piece of work that you've done. Uh, so I guess like what's next? Is there anything else I mean, you've talked about the fact that you're working on you've kind of got an empath you know, V2 that you're working on, but is there anything else that you kind of have lined up like in the coming months or years or
yeah.
just moving
I'm
forward?
hopefully gonna have a bigger presence in Marfa this year. I don't know if I can't really talk about it too much yet, but hopefully gonna have a show there, and that's with this. I'm gonna be making some sculptures for that mostly. I think they'll mostly be sculpture based things, and we're thinking through like uh, what the show's going to be have besides the sculptures, and so it'll be kind of a fun. We're planning that right now. Not that's not set in stone either, so knock on wood. But yeah, I'm working on that show with sculptures. I have Empath 2. I have a couple commissions. I've been doing more commissions lately, which is kind of cool to like take in the context of a like the specific place in the room this something is going to go, and then kind of designing around that is fun. Um, I I in particular am really excited that I might use one of the commissions as sort of a segue into what I do in Marfa this year. So yeah, I've got actually probably too many things going on. Fortunately, but like with the baby coming and stuff, it's gonna be an interesting spring and summer because I got a lot. I signed up for a lot. So
It sounds like it, man. Well, um, I'm wishing you the best of luck, man. And
thank you.
I don't know if there's anything else that you want to touch on. I know we've already covered a lot of grounds, I think.
Yeah, no, this has been great. I'm all
Good,
set.
man.
It's been fun to think about. I haven't thought about some of these projects in a while, so it's fun to remember.
Hell yeah, man. I'm happy to, kind of spark your memory. And it's been very interesting for me. It gives me a better sense of how kind of each milestone that you've kind of had led to the next. And really excited for you, man. And just congratulations on everything you've been able to achieve so far. And yeah, wishing you all the best. Hope to see you in Marfa. And yeah, best of luck with the little one on the way.
Thank you so much.
That's another huge milestone. So
Thank you. And yeah, like you said, like you're an example of like some guy on the internet that sent me a DM 4 years ago, and now we're talking for 2.5 hours together. It's just great, and so thanks for having me on.
for sure, man. My pleasure.
All right. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and YouTube, and give me a follow on Twitter at longformart. As mentioned, none of this is financial advice. This is for entertainment and information purposes only. More information can be found in the podcast episode description. And thanks so much for listening in. I'll be back soon with another episode.